Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak on this extremely important subject because I've actually been leading an effort to help deal with it for the last 3 years. I've taken the initiative to bring together a group of civil society stakeholders, healthcare experts, practitioners, the Director General of AIMS, technical experts, and a few fellow MPs who are willing to accept my invitation to an annual closed-door discussion on the magnitude of the current crisis of toxic air quality across our country. The discussions in 2017, 2018, also this year, dealt not only with the current state of air quality, but also extended to deliberations on what we could possibly do as concerned citizens and as elected representatives to create and implement a national action plan on cleaning up our air. Since the inaugural meeting in 2017, this platform has brought together some of the most accomplished and experienced stakeholders on this issue of vital national importance, including for the first time this year, the Honourable Minister of the Environment, my good friend Sri Prakash Javadekar, who addressed this year's gathering in a comprehensive ideation of this government's strategies to address air pollution. So I think we're on the right track, and I'm glad to see that the Honourable Speaker has taken this conversation forward at a time when it simply cannot be ignored anymore because, and I'm sorry this is the case, the issue of air pollution has simply so far, until this debate, so far not been given the due recognition it deserves or even serious discussion within the walls of this august chamber. In the few times it has become a political hot potato, it's always in the few weeks before and after Diwali. In fact, just after Diwali is when the debate also peaks, as does the AQI. And the situation we have is focused on urban centres, is very often reduced to a Delhi-Punjab debate, and honestly that misses the larger point, that this is a national crisis, a perennial issue, not just in November, and it's a pan-Indian problem we must solve together. The 2017 State of the Global Air Report, there is one more last year, I've not seen it, published by the Health Effects Institute, revealed that since 1990, the number of ozone-related deaths in India has risen by 150%. Staggering figure. The economic implications of deteriorating air quality are ominous as well, with a 2013 World Bank study estimating that welfare costs and lost labour income due to air pollution cost the exchequer nearly 8.5% of India's GDP. So our GDP would be that much higher if we dealt with our air successfully. Labour losses due to air pollution, in terms of the number of man-days lost, for instance, resulted in an estimated calculated loss of $55.39 billion in a single year, and further premature deaths will cost our country an estimated $505 billion, or roughly 7.6% in this coming fiscal year. And the effect on our quality of life is also incalculable. We can't do it in numbers. But I remember when I was a student at Delhi University in the early 70s, September to February used to be the best months of the year. Today, let's face it, these are the worst months of the year. And we are in a situation in which I can talk about a diplomatic friend of mine who, after 3 years' service in Delhi, was taking his exit medical examination, and his doctor asked him, how many packs of cigarettes do you smoke every day? And the poor diplomat protested, I'm a non-smoker, never smoked in my life. And he said, your lungs show otherwise. And the poor chap had never lit up. He had merely been breathing Delhi's smoggy air 3 winters in a row. It really is that bad. The New York Times former India correspondent Gardner Harris wrote a famous, or perhaps to many of us a notorious, article in 2015 in which he explained why he was leaving his post prematurely. He says, merely living in Delhi is damaging my children's health. Describing the asthma and the travails of his 8-year-old son, Harris wrote that Delhi, and I quote, was suffering from a dire pediatric respiratory crisis, with a recent study showing that nearly half the city's 4.4 million school children have irreversible lung damage from the poisonous air. Irreversible lung damage, Mr. Chairman. He felt that he and other expatriates posted to Delhi were pursuing their careers at their children's expense. And he concluded that it was unethical for him and those who have a choice to willingly raise children here. So he picked up his kids and left India. and wrote about it. And this is the kind of thing that makes many, as Rajiv Pratap Rudy was mentioning, many foreigners hesitate to even come to our country. Rudy साहब कह रहा था कि जब लोग तिरुवनंतपुरम से दिल्ली आते हैं उनकी हालत क्या है। मैं बता सकता हूँ, मैं तो हर हफ्ता आता हूँ तिरुवनंतपुरम से दिल्ली, और मैं कहूँगा कि जब हवाई जहाज से उठाता हूँ तो खांसी आती है, जब सांस लेता हूँ तो खांसी आती है. That's the experience of all of us in Delhi, and this is the situation that we are finding ourselves in the nation's capital. The New York Times correspondent may have a choice. Unfortunately, MPs and most Indians don't. So a study was conducted by the Kolkata-based Chittaranjan National Cancer Institute, just of school children in Delhi between 4 and 17 years of age. And they found that the key indicators of respiratory health and lung function are markedly worse than their counterparts elsewhere. In fact, the figures are 2 to 4 times as bad for children in Delhi than in other places. And according to the Cancer Institute, these are not reversible. So it is actually true to say that bringing up our children in Delhi is a crime against our children. Toxic air quality is a silent killer, and today in India, the air we breathe has itself become a public health crisis, one that is slowly but surely crippling our country. But at the same time, this is not politics, because honestly, it's like what I've been saying for some time about our foreign policy. I always say there's no BJP foreign policy or Congress foreign policy, there's only an Indian foreign policy. And so too with air quality. Our political differences on the subject have to end where the stratosphere begins, because you and I and all the other members from other parties are breathing the same air. There is only one Indian air quality. Currently it's pretty bad, and we need to address its toxicity together. It's a problem that can be addressed if the right kind of sustained campaign focuses on both short-term and long-term interventions on this issue. Take, for example, China's action. As recently as 2013, they had peak toxicity. They were higher than us. Beijing was worse ranked than Delhi. But with public scrutiny mounting in the wake of the Beijing Olympics, China formulated the National Air Pollution Action Plan, which imposed stringent controls on emissions, strict guidelines for air quality checks, and China's air quality strategy since, though it's still in an incipient stage, has made a lot of difference, and Beijing is no longer joining us or competing with us for the worst, most polluted city in the world. That's a valuable lesson we can learn. Of course, India is not China. We are a democracy where the smallest voice matters and where the means are as important as the end. So we cannot have any compulsion or other methods that the Chinese use. But we can certainly see what worked there that we can borrow here. Today, somebody put on social media this picture of this video of this tower that they have in Beijing that soaks up the smog, converts it into carbon particles that are then compressed into diamonds. And if you buy a diamond ring, you're actually donating to cure the smog of Beijing. Now, if they can do that in Beijing, is there a possibility of doing it in Delhi? Worth finding out. I just feel we should explore what others have done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, India has, of course, shown commitment and willingness. The new National Clean Air Program is important, and as others have been saying, the involvement of the government in the Copenhagen Agreement, the Paris Agreement, and so on. But still, the pace of action at home, in terms of what we are all breathing, has been found wanting. Let's accept that our wealth of civil society stakeholders and technical experts have not been adequately consulted. There's been very limited public consultation by the government on the plan and its targets. The timing is also a matter of concern, because the plan was announced just as the previous government, that is the Modi government part 1, had just wound up its term. And there was immediately, obviously, no follow-up. We need to pick up the threads in now Modi part 2 or BJP part 2, NDA part 2 is what you probably want me to say, and actually resume concrete steps towards implementation. I think this discussion alone is not enough, Mr. Chairman. The minister should really come to the parliament and specify an action plan. The government and all of us must do this by such and such timeline. Only then will we actually make measurable progress. Making speeches we can all do, and that's what we are here to do. But we have to have concrete action. I do want to say that it is concerning that the national plan, as I have read it, has no legal measures incorporated within it to ensure accountability or penalize non-implementation, which will limit the effectiveness of the plan. If it was converted into an act, into a new National Clean Air Act, debated in Parliament and voted in Parliament, it would have the force of law. And that's something I strongly recommend to convey to the Environment Minister. So just to summarize, the action plan, in my view, must be ambitious. It must bring in the best of tech-based innovation and interventions wedded with our age-old heritage of sustainable practice, and of course conservation, because we have things worth conserving. We need to accept that our present infrastructure is insufficient. Even to monitor the scale of toxicity and air quality, we haven't done a great job. I know some of us have apps on our mobile phones that give us the AQI. But the fact is, in many parts of India, look at rural India, where the chula continues to burn out the lungs of citizens who have no affordable alternatives, or very few that they can afford to use. There is a problem even in rural India. It's not that we only suffer in Delhi. Second, the plan must be courageous in its guidelines. There must be tough deadlines and targets, and that I've already mentioned, so I won't repeat it. We must, of course, be conscious not to weaken the weakest in our society. Farmers, some have already spoken very emotionally about our farmers and how the burden should not be put on them because stubble burning is a cost-saving practice and so on. Well, the government has the money and the resources to give them a viable and cost-saving alternative. And in a diverse democracy like ours, we have to take all stakeholders along. Third, we must have a collaborative action plan. That is, we must bring together the best minds in our country. We must take the civil society on board, use our cutting-edge technical resources, the vast knowledge pool we are blessed to have. I must say that I've met many very impressive experts on the question of air quality who are frustrated that they can't even get an audience with the members of the executive dealing with this issue. I think it's important that we now work together in a collaborative spirit, and that's why I convened my roundtable all these years in order to create a platform that will strengthen these bridges, and I hope that Parliament can be the right forum to take it forward. Now, we all are realists. We know this is not going to change overnight or even in a year or two or even by the end of this Parliament in 4.5 years. But the fact is, we must sow the seeds of our campaign against toxic air now if we want to breathe better air when we come back, if we come back in the next session of Parliament. It is genuinely not too late. The fact is that this national crisis cannot just be confronted after Diwali or in the winter months. It is extremely important that we understand the urgency of this as well as the widespread impact that our actions need to have and should have across the country. I do want to stress it's not just an environmental issue. Only the Environment Minister is listening to our debate, but it's also a national health issue. Many of our doctors, as I mentioned, the Director General of AIIMS was in, I'm just concluding, sir. The Director General of AIIMS is an expert in respiratory illnesses. Doctors have testified on what the health crisis is on this issue. It's an economic and development issue, as I gave you the figures from the World Bank. It's an issue of how India consumes, how India travels. It's also an issue that is central to the future of our country. So I hope that we will come up with equitable solutions, that we come up with collaborative solutions, that we find the political will for a legislative approach to implementing an effective national clean air policy. And I do want finally to say that I believe we have the will and the capacity. Don't forget what the British had reduced us to by 1947 and how we have climbed up from then to what we are today. We were a poster child for poverty, disease, destitution. Today we are a thriving economy and society. We can find the same willpower to conquer this challenge of toxic air. I do believe that, that since this is something that affects all of us, we should work together. And in many ways, just as for John F. Kennedy, the moonshot was the great aspiration of his generation, I would urge that we make cleaning up our air the moonshot of our times so that we finally are in a position to give our children and grandchildren decent air to breathe in a country of which we can be proud and live in health and contentment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jai Hind.